Welcome to Picking Coaching Moments as a Career Advisor. Now, for this talk, this is about my own personal journey and my learnings, but I do find that this information is helpful and might aid you on your journey as well as a coach who is taking on this work. So that whatever I'm sharing with you happens to be what I'm realizing, what I'm going through, what I'm noticing. And so you can use that as a jumping off point or inspiration for what you are going through and how you are defining this. As a matter of fact, part of what we're going to do is I'm going to share with you my working definition of career advisement and coaching because they are different. And then we're going to get into how to pick your moments. And I'm just going to lay this all out for you. And I encourage you in the comments below to share your own tips and tricks. Now, in terms of my coach journey, I am not going to lie. I actually did get to a point where I earned my associate coach credential, my ACC, from the ICF organization. And then when it came time to renew, that's kind of where things got a little murky. I had taken on roles as career advisement, thinking I was going to be doing coaching, thinking I was going to be working as a coach, and even negotiated coach in my title. What I can share with you is that definitely I was on that struggle bus, as I'm calling it. So for me, that includes money. I had, it's such a big investment that you have to be intentional in terms of saving and also spending that money to do what you are trying to do longer term. Time. The time to put that application together was also part of it. And when you're working full time, and if you're working for a startup, that's more than full time, to be honest. So that is a lot to contend with and trying to understand at the same time. So your mentor, your support coaching community is, even if you adopt a new one after your initial training, so helpful. And my attention, I had to have enough energy at the end of a working day or on the weekends where I could put it all together. And to be honest, I was actually doing full-time career advisement and freelancing on the side. So there's a lot in there. I discovered at a certain point that I was going through bad habits. I was doing a lot of answering questions and taking over the session and really doing the advisement part, which we're going to get into. So when it was time for me to recommit to getting my credential, I really had to work through those bad habits. So ultimately, it came down to my decision that I wanted more. I wanted more of myself. I wanted more for coaching. I wanted to make more of an impact as a coach. So I had to be more intentional and ultimately pick my moments. So what that looks like is I went through the 10 hours of one-on-one mentor coaching. And I had to come to a point where I had to truly listen to my own coach recordings and figure out what I felt was a good approach to the core competencies and how to be better. And the recommendation of using Ray Notes, game changing, because I could mark those off and see which core competencies for that credential I was not hitting and be better about it, like be conscious of it so I could work on it. And then going through group mentoring was also helpful because I could hear where other people were struggling and how they brought it in to the group and what those remedies could be. Not everybody in my group were also career advisors, so some of this is me applying my learning to the journey that I'm on. Speaking of the journey that I'm on, in terms of my working definition of career advisement, so I invite you to write your own, but my working definition is that this is about the support of job seekers with advice, direction, and insights to help accelerate the job search process for them. So the skills that are used, and there are a lot, are teaching, coaching, mentoring. I offer friendship in here. I'm a cheerleader. It's consulting because I'm answering questions and I'm advising. I'm making those recommendations. What I had to work on is coaching. So for me, it's a partnering conversation that honors the job seeker as an individual, as a creative, resourceful, and whole individual, which means there's nothing to fix. So part of this is the focus on their motivation, their inspiration, and their approach. So the skills that I'm using is the active listening, my empathy, and ultimately my curiosity, so that the focus isn't on me and what I know, but what they are going through and what they can bring to the table and what they're going to do with it. So picking those coaching moments, they were hidden. I'm not going to lie. When I was like, man, I got into this bad habit and it was a reaction to what I needed to do in certain work environments, I thought. But if I'm going to own my own power, I had to pick my moments, because coaching, there's so much that goes into it. So in terms of those moments where I could pull this together, I found that I needed to work on my questions at a certain point. I thought that I was really strong in that. I got away from it. So doing things where I wrote emails, I wrote feedback, and I was working on powerful questions. So picking the moments and writing, thinking through, being intentional with those powerful questions at those key choice points. So the written powerful questions are just as important, because I'm using my coach brain to work those out. Asking for a call is important. And now I say call, but it could be coach meeting, because if you're still doing one-on-ones, you can do that. I just happen to do everything virtual right now because I'm better on audio only. Like, I want my brain to go. I'm a pace around the room. I do my coaching in that way. So on different moments, I'm going to ask for a call. It might be a video call, might be voice to voice, but I'm going to get that call moment where I could do true coaching and work on that skill. Now, to do that, you do want to establish a coaching agreement. If you're working as a career advisor, that means that you have a client that you're working with. So the coaching agreement is going to be not the same as if they were your individual client. You could set that up as a pre-work, setting those expectations in the email, in the calendar invite before you get into that call, and you're setting the stage for that conversation. Granted, you still have to hit those core competencies by setting the agreement in the moment, but setting the expectations for coaching happens before you get to that call. And then one of the things I do want to talk through is how to avoid the hook. The hook is the stuff that sends you off into those habits you're trying to get away from as a coach. Like getting asked a question and immediately answering it and telling everybody what you think. So that for me is my hook. Now, in terms of those powerful questions, I had an epiphany that helped to change my coaching, because initially in the ACC pivot to PCC, I was in the PCC, if you didn't already know, stands for Professional Coach Credential, and it's from the ICF. I really struggled with those closed-ended questions. I really got into a bad habit there as well. So as I really started listening to my recordings and I really started digging in, I realized that powerful questions really start with the how, the what, and the when. So if I think of a topic to ask and I just start it and I reword it, so I start with how did you approach that? Or how do you want to approach that? So if I start the questions with that, they're more likely to be open-ended than if I do the is kind of questions that I was doing. Now, the asking for the call, when you're career advising, it's either going to come up in conversation, in written tasks, or in emails. And you might notice that, and this is where like some of that perceptiveness, that empathy, and that active listening, when you see that they're struggling, that's an opportunity for a call to dig into that. If you're noticing negative self-talk, so that saboteur is really coming out, that's an opportunity to talk through that. if there's a lot of back and forth in emails and they're asking questions and you're doing the powerful questions and they're responding and you're going back and forth in that way, there's an opportunity to do the coaching call right there. 3 times back and forth, and that's worth a call because you can save a lot of time and energy doing it that way. The opportunity to facilitate clarity is a good reason to ask for a call as well. So to set up the coaching, you could do the messaging before and you could assign it as pre-work. Like, here are the resources we're going to go over. Review those and let's talk through it when we get to the call. So you're setting up the call, the meeting, as the coaching. So instead of giving the resources during the coaching call, you are going to do that ahead of time so that you're doing more coaching during the call. You want to set that expectation up off the top. You might even say, you know what? I'm going to do this, or let's coach through this, which means I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. Just some people going into the conversation might not expect it, and they might be turned off by all the questions. Now, in addition to that, honoring the person that you're working with in this scenario, you got to recognize when they're not coachable. If they're not open to coaching in general, in this moment, or for this topic, recognizing what that means, it's going to be just as important when you're doing when you're working with your own clients and you're trying to decide, is this a coachable moment? Is this topic big enough to coach? So that is important as well. But what makes this coaching? And it's the focus on the other person rather than your expertise. And this is kind of where I'm working through some stuff on my own. I'm working through not sharing everything I might have learned about a topic, but, offering up questions that lead the job seeker, the client, the participant, to their own revelations. So it's their agenda. What do you want to talk about for this? What would be the most useful for you? Using this to ask questions so that their insights come forward, and you can even share your observations. Now, in terms of going through and working with my latest mentor, it's been really helpful to recognize that I can offer observations and I can do it without attachment. Like, I'm noticing some things and they may be off the mark, but they might spur the conversation in the direction it needs to go. And as long as I don't have attachment to what I'm observing and offering that up and whether or not they're going to take it, that's more in line with coaching and honoring the individual. And my new favorite learning is acknowledging and asking. So if they're saying a bunch of stuff or they're having some kind of feelings or expressing feelings, I can acknowledge those and I can ask a question. So the coaching is the asking of the question to provide the insights and facilitate the growth that's to come from that experience or the understanding. And that's where the clarity could really come in. So avoiding the hook. There is so much going on in this picture. You could be looking anywhere, not necessarily at me. Same to me for coaching conversation. There could be so many avenues I would go down, but if I'm honoring the other person as driving the agenda, what I ask and what we focus in on is their choice. The hook for me, and you can recognize them for yourself when you run into them, but the hook for me is when a job seeker asks, what should I do? Or they might ask, what do you think? They might even say statements like, I'm not good enough. And all of these things elicit a certain reaction if I let them in myself. So if they say, what should I do? The old me, the career advisor part of me is going to answer, well, I recommend blah, 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 all the things that I'm going to say. When they ask me, what do you think? I could also tell them. And then when they're not saying they're not good enough and they're really hard on themselves, I could start in that encouragement mode, that cheerleader mode. But that isn't coaching. So some of the things that I've learned to do is reframe how I approach this and how I think about that. So the hook is anything you could get snagged on that's going to take you outside of coaching, which is your goal. And because coaching is about empowering the individual, it's a win-win. So the first reframing that I'm working with right now is seeing that if I just jump in and answer the question and get to the point and start giving feedback and recommendations, then it could be seen as a rescue. And if I'm rescuing them, I'm not really empowering them to be their best self, to learn from this experience, to come up with their own solution so that it's more likely to stick when they do a job search without me later in their career. So rethinking this as an opportunity to empower them rather than rescue them is how I'm working through my reaction to their questions that are directly to me. So I have this tendency where if somebody has negative self-talk, I might want to encourage them. So alternatively, I am looking at, okay, so maybe we explore this. If I'm exploring this with them, I can get more at the root cause of where this is coming from. Is this their voice or someone else's? What is this saboteur that's coming up, and where is this coming from? So those are some of the things that might come up and how I'm reframing it to spur this next part. So in working with my own coaches and getting coaching on this topic, to avoid the hook, I'm down to 2 alternatives to turn this around, keep this in coaching. One is I could return the question. So somebody says, what should I be doing? That's a great question. What should you be doing? Now, some people do get annoyed if you answer a question with a question. It's partly where I got into the bad habits of just answering the question and moving on. But in working more intentionally as a coach, I could turn that around by reframing that question. And if I could tell that they're going to be annoyed by it, I can either proactively do it as giving them an option and say, you know what, that's a great question. Now, is that something you would like me to answer? Now, see, I did that is. So this could be a closed-ended question, but it's a clarifying question, and the rest will be open-ended. I'm just going to call that out for the coaches that are watching this. So I can give them an option, say, hey, that is a good question. Is that something you really want me to answer, or would you prefer that I answer that? Or do you want to explore together how you might feel about that situation, or how you might answer that question? And then they're of choice. And by honoring their choice, that is coaching, even though I asked that closed-ended question. But we're back into that coaching mode. And then I also don't have to worry as a career advisor if they're going to give me some kind of evaluation where they're like, she wouldn't answer any question. Because I got that evaluation. And so this is my learning around it and how I can do both and still be a better coach. So speaking of my coach journey also, I will acknowledge the fact that all of this work has led me to earn my PCC. So I'm rocking that right now. I'm very happy. I'm also growth-minded. So we're going to try for this MCC. And if nothing else, we're going to empower some people and be better coaches. If you are on this journey with me, or you want to talk through these things, maybe you're even an ACC looking for a mentor, I do recommend group coaching, and in particular, Lissa DeHart. That is where some of my transformation has taken a very positive turn, and I recommend working with her and doing the group mentoring that she offers. So lissadehart.com is a place to go. I am going to put my affiliate link into the chat. You can go directly there, or you could do a shout out through me and use that affiliate link. Now, if you do want to talk more with me about this, I've got an ongoing free session that's called Career Q&A, but I invite you to attend if you have questions, and you could also hire and work with me directly. Your partner in change, Sacred Time.